Hi friends, this is Leela. Welcome to my channel Leela WebDev. We are learning about the CSS course. So in the previous video, we have learned about the order property. So how the order property affects the flex items, we have seen it. So we have completed these all the flex box. So when in one line is there, so how to increase the items width and height and all those things we have seen it. Now let's try to see about the alignment in the Flexbox alignment. So how we can align the items in the Flexbox. Let's try to see it. For example, if you try to see the output, so this is the output which we are trying to see. So this is the output we are able to have it, right? So which is having flex basis of 25% each one. Let's remove this 25% and order property also I am trying to remove it. So we don't want this order property, and also we don't want this flex basis 25%. So now it will come one by one like this. How much content is there? That much content only it will take it. Now Flexbox brought with it a set of properties for aligning the items and distributing the space between the items. Now the space, whatever the space is remained in the container, the flex items is taking the space, how much it is available for it. But here lot of content is, a lot of space is available here. So now for distributing this space, or for aligning the items across this space, so Flexbox has came with a set of properties. So these set of properties, so these are very useful. These properties are very useful. So they have since moved into their own specification. We will also see these properties in the grid layout also, which we will see it afterwards. But here we will see how they work in the Flexbox too. Normally the set of properties which we are trying to discuss, so alignment of the space between the items, the set of properties, normally we can say that we can divide these things into the two groups. So one group is nothing but what I can say is properties for space distribution and the properties for the alignment. So that means properties for the space distribution and also the properties for alignment. So first one, for the space distribution, the available space distribution between the items is done by these properties. So that is nothing but first one is the justify content, and the another one is an align content. We'll see one by one about this one all. And the last one is the place content. So these properties are useful for distributing the space between the flex items. Now the next type of properties is used for the alignments in the Flexbox. So alignment in the Flexbox. So for making the alignment in the Flexbox, we will be using align self and also align hyphen items. So that's it. So for alignment of items in the Flexbox, we use align self and align items. For distributing the space between the flex items, we use align content, justify content, and place content. So if you are working on the main axis, so we know that we will be having two axes, right? One is main axis and another one is the cross axis. So when you are working on the main axis, then the properties will begin with justify hyphen. Okay, justify hyphen. On the cross axis, always you will be having on the cross axis. So we will use something like align hyphen. So this is the thing which you need to understand it. So it may be align hyphen, align content, something like that. So align hyphen we will be using. So first let's try. So these are the properties which are useful for the alignment and the distribution of the space between the flex items. Now let's try to see distribution of the space on the main axis. First one. So you'll see about how we can distribute the space on the main axis. The distribution of the space on the main axis is done by the justify hyphen, right? We'll try to see about this one. With the HTML used earlier, the flex items are laid out as a row. So if you try to see here in our output, these flex items, we have seen it as a row. There is space on the main axis. So we are able to see the space on the main axis. The items are not big enough to completely fill the flex container. So the items are itself are not big enough to fill the entire container. The items line up at the start of the flex container because the initial value of this justify content is the flex start. So when you don't mention anything justify hyphen content property, so the flex item containers are placed at the starting. Why? Because the property for this one is the justify hyphen content property is the flex start. The items line up at the start and any extra space is at the end. Add the justify hyphen content property. If you add the justify hyphen content property to the flex container, we need to add it to the flex container. give it a value of flex end, and the items will move up to the end of the container, and the spare space will be moved to the start. Let's try to see it. So now here for the flex container, we need to give justify hyphen content. So the default one will be the flex start. Okay, the default one will be always the flex start. So if you mention this one as a flex start, nothing will happen. Why? Because by default the property value, the justify content property value is flex start only. If you mention this one as a flex end, then what will happen is, if you mention this one as flex end, automatically all the flex items which are available, it will move to the end, and whatever the space is left out in the flex container, it will come to the start. So this is the flex end. You can also distribute the space between the items using the space between. So if you want to distribute the space between these things, so you can see the space between. So we'll be having these things, space between. So if you try to see the space between, whatever the space is left over in the container, the space will be distributed evenly between the items. So here the first and the fourth item, the left and the right, so you're not able to see the space between is this one. If you want to divide the space means, so you can have another option, that is nothing but space around. So if you give the space around, so around you will be able to get the space. Here you need to understand that here you, for example, here if you are having 10 pixel of space for this one means, here you will be having 20 pixel, 20 pixel, 20 pixel, and the last it will be having 10 pixel. So that means for the first and the fourth, it will take only one time, and between these flex items, it will take 2 times. So that is the thing you need to understand for the space around. Now what I want to do is, everywhere I need to have an equal space, left and right, everywhere I need to have an equal space. Then for that one, you can use space evenly. Space evenly. That's it. So if you try to use the space evenly, now equally the space will be divided to all the items. So if you want to equally divide the space between the left and right means, you need to use space evenly. Or otherwise first and last you can have, you want only the half of the space to be arranged means, so you can use the space around. Or otherwise you don't want for the first and last to be applied space means, so you can use the space between. So now you can know about this flex start and flex end also. So these are the main properties which we'll be using for the justify content. So you understand that justify content is used to distribute the space on the main axis for the flex content, for the flex items. So it will have flex end. Okay, it will move the items to the end. Flex start, which is a default value, and you can see about space between. We have seen the space will be distributed between the flex items, and the space around. So around items it will be distributed, and also the space evenly. So these are the items which we will be using more often. So other than this, we don't use any other things. So flex start, flex end, and also we have another one also, center. Okay, I forgot to tell you. So if you mention this as center, so all the items will come to the center of the container. See, the center of the container you will be having. That's it. See, these are the only things you will be having. So center is also one of the things you need to remember. So these are the properties which you will be having in the justify content. For example, let's say that I told you that justify content will distribute the space around the main axis. If I change the direction, flex direction, now the main axis will be arranged in the column, so height wise. So now if you try to see here, the same thing happens. Now this time the flex direction, it is arranging in the main axis. If you try to increase the height, it should set the height or the block size. Now here if you try to have, it is in the center. The same thing if I try to use this flex end, so it will be at the end. So now the main axis has shifted to the vertical. So that is the reason we are able to see space between. The same thing happens. Space between. So I can use the space between. Space will be divided vertically, and the space evenly. We can use the space evenly. I will try to show you this space evenly also. Now if you see the output, so it will be divided space evenly. And now if I want to use space around, so the same thing, but it happens this time vertically. That is the main thing you need to understand. So this is all about the justify FN content. For the justify FN content property to do anything, you need to have a spare space in your container on the main axis. If your item fills the axis, then there is no space to share out, means the property won't work anything. With flex direction column, so now justify content will work on the column wise. To have the spare space in your container when working on the column wise, you need to have a container height or the block size. Otherwise, otherwise you won't have the space to distribute. So this is all about the justify content. So justify content is used to share the space, to distribute the space for the flex item on the main axis. This is all what I want to tell you about the justify content. Hope you understood about this justify content CSS property in the Flexbox for alignment thing, for sharing of the space distribution. If you have any doubts or any suggestions, please post the comments below to this video. And if you like this video, please do support me by subscribing to my channel. Thank you.